Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. It's great to have everybody showing up today. Thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking about choosing the essence of strategy today. We're going to be talking about how to make trade-offs, how to focus, and how that is really essentially what strategy is. And we'll talk about how it applies to the presidential campaign and to campaigns in general, and how it really is actually a pretty important aspect of life in general. And I am now joined here by my co-host, Sean Bartley. Sean, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Good morning to you. Good morning to everybody listening out there. Glad to be with you. And how are you this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. We had the nor'easter come through, and it was icy and cold and frigid. As a update from yesterday, we talked about how I was going to go look at the Christmas decorations at the White House, and it was lovely. But going through the icy rain was quite a harrowing thing. But it was all worth it once we got to be there. The First Lady did an excellent job, and it's all very lovely. And there's some snow on the ground, so it made that picturesque as well. So it was a great experience. And of course, masks and everything else. So all the pictures have masks in it. That's just part of life today. But anyway, doing very well. How about you? What's new in your world? What are you watching and paying attention to?
Well, I think just really been trying to pay attention to what's going on in the news and seeing what all's going on there. And then, on the personal front, we are my trivia team and I are going to defend our 2-week title this evening, so we're very excited about that. But
so, do you do calisthenics to get ready for that? Do you
I wish there was prep time for that, but no.
Yeah.
No, just go and have a good time, and every once in a while we leave with a victory. So, and attaboy, and way to feel good about it, I guess. So,
do each of your team members have their own specialty, like this area of knowledge that they know about their own trivia?
Yeah, I think what makes our team great is that we really do have a wide variety of knowledge and talent, and so we really enjoy that. And it's a good group of friends to get together. And I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes your group of friends all seem to have the same knowledge base as you, and then and then you then there are certain categories where you just fall flat on your face. But if anybody wants to help with things like the periodic table, please let me know, because that is not.
They can be added to your team. Can people join virtually?
Yeah, that'd be nice. We are actually doing it in person, which is also something amazing. Maybe something about good about living in the Midwest. So So anyway, we that's a fun thing outside of work and whatnot that's going on.
As we have more people streaming in, I have a question about that. I don't know. Can you say on the live stream what the name of the team is?
Sure. Well, I'll say it, and I don't know. We can take it out, and
you never know. Some people have some pretty terrible names.
Yeah, we're the Quizlamic extremist.
It's a little bit on the line. No, that's perfect.
Yeah,
it was Trivia Newton-John at one time was one of the ones.
Yeah, we debated between Let's Get Quizzical and Trivia Newton-John, and then where we landed. So. Yeah.
Cool. I love it. That's great. So if you're coming in from any one of the platforms from across the internet, we're on 12 different platforms, Twitch, on Facebook's 3 different pages. And if you're on YouTube or wherever you're at, you can post a question or comment. You can join the conversation. We're going to be talking about choosing the essence of strategy here in a moment. And we're going to be talking about topical things and then, things just from history around that topic. And if you want to join the conversation, if you have questions, if you think that we're all wet on something and you want to just point it out, we'll do that. And we'd love to hear your comments. So please do join the conversation. And if you're listening on one of the podcasting platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, please do follow or subscribe. Actually, any platform you're on, you can follow or subscribe. And that way you get notifications when we go live, and you'll be able to access the information very quickly. And then please do leave a review and let us know what you like about the show, and we will be sure to include more of that. And thank you for doing that. So thank you for being here. And Sean, if you'd like to, you can let people know. We have folks who make it possible for us to do this. The first 2 are ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. And we want to thank us. So no, in all seriousness, look, we love this conversation we get to have with you, but what we really love is the ability to have a conversation with you about what running for office looks like, or how you can make a difference in your community, and how we can help empower you to do that. That's what we do at Olson Strategies. That's www.olsonstrategies.com. That's OLSON strategies.com. You can email me at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. And we would love, again, look, we know that you're out to do big things in the world, and you might just not know exactly what that looks like. And that's why people like us are in this business, and we enjoy doing it. So reach out to us, because we would love to have a conversation with you, not just about what it looks like to run for office, but to really see where the best fit is for you to make a difference in your community, your state, the country, or even the world. And what that looks like, and how we can best serve that vision that you have for your neck of the woods. And then we're proud to have the sponsorship of Grassfire. You can get to them at www.grassfire.us. And what do they do? It's basically the one-on-one human interaction between your campaign, your issue, your organization, and the voter. And how do they do it? It's canvassing. It's on the doorstep. It's petitioning. It's in front of the grocery store, giving that voter the ability to sign your petition when they did not get out of their car thinking, man, I'd like to sign a petition today. Mm-hmm. But after really just being able to quickly and easily give them the information so that they can make a difference right there. That's what Grassfire does. Live calling. This is either your get out the vote calls if you're in a place like Georgia trying to get out the vote right now in these pivotal Senate races, or it could be persuasion calls. That is what Grassfire does, and really connects with the voter and gives you the information you need to be successful. Grassfire also fuels 10centtexting.com. This is your ability to connect with people right where they are on their cell phone. Look, legislative sessions are coming up, and
in 2 weeks in some cases.
Yes, and it's so right after the new year. Some are sworn in this week, and then the session begins at the beginning of next year. So as that's happening, and you've got an issue that you're trying to make sure voters know about in particular districts. Maybe you're a legislator and you want to actually let people know what's going on in real time. That is so difficult in a newsletter that right now the mail's taking 2 weeks to get to people. So this is the opportunity to get to them right away and get them compelling information they need to know what's going on under the dome. So that is 10centtexting.com, a great way to reach out to your constituents, the voters who need to hear from you, or voters who need to be persuading a legislator a certain way.
Yep, absolutely. A very, very important tool to use, and we're going to talk about that. The tools that you use are not the same as the strategy that you employ, but this has been a pretty effective tool for a lot of folks. And as you've mentioned before, they literally wrote the book on how to do political texting the best way, 8 pro tips. So go check that out at 10centtexting.com as well. So again, I just want to remind people, if you'd like to join the conversation, please do so. And I want to thank JT for already sharing the program. It makes a huge difference, and it gets it to as many people as possible. As Sean was alluding to, there's some friction. We talked about disincentives yesterday on the program, and there's a lot of disincentives out there. Something I've been thinking about since we were doing the incentives and disincentives conversation is we have a situation where Facebook and Twitter and these other entities are starting to create a market opportunity. I think this is obvious to everybody because everybody's taking actions, but we started putting to place a system to be able to share our episodes on Parler. It takes something that Parler's not quite there as far as the software, but we're trying to make sure that we can do that. Rumble, we're trying to set it up so that we can have our videos on Rumble. Rumble eventually is going to have a live streaming option. They don't have it yet, but so what's happening is disincentives to prevent conservatives from getting out their message is moving the marketplace elsewhere because there's friction there and it's making it harder. So that is a perfect case of that effect in reality right now, which if you haven't seen that episode, it was a really excellent one. Thank you, Sean, on that one. And we did a great job with that. So people can go check that out. That was yesterday's episode on incentives and disincentives. So, and thank you, JT, for sharing that content as well. We really do appreciate it. And
I think you made a great point there about that there isn't now an incentive to come up with alternatives. Mm-hmm. And I guess part of me, it's a shame that there is an incentive for that, because I do think as we've talked about in previous episodes, there is a possibility where you could only be getting your information from sources that you already agree with. Mm-hmm. And now another incentive where we basically bifurcate where people, even the platforms on which they get their information, to be served by a certain algorithm, certain things. Mm-hmm. This idea of basically 2 movies playing is only going to widen and only going to
totally.
And it's a shame. And and I guess it's a shame that Facebook and Twitter don't see that they actually have an opportunity here to lessen that gap. And I think we were probably on the road to that until they decided that they needed to be an arm of one unit, or
really they were starting to kind of turn that corner, and it just went completely the other direction. This probably last 6 months. Who knows what has been in the works for a while. Google made it pretty clear for quite some time that they were, since the last election, last presidential election, that they were going to start putting their thumb on the scale. And there's been research that's shown that is the case, and they have successfully done that. And they were called out by a couple of organizations that track these things, and which is really great that those organizations exist, first of all, and that they were willing to do it. In one case, it's that professor, I forget his name right now, who is actually a liberal, very liberal college professor, but he's focused on these kinds of things. And appreciate the comment. Facebook and Twitter are dividing America, says the audience, and that that is definitely, it seems to be adding fuel to the fire. For sure. It's giving everybody different realities. Like your reality is based off of what you see on your phone, what you see on your TV, and what you see on your computer. And even if you turned off all those things, which some people have been trying to do, you do get a better experience of life when you turn them off. But the truth is, you talk to other people who are getting their experience of the greater world from those things. So you can't even completely disconnect from it unless you go to Walden Lake and you just cut yourself off from society for for a year. Then maybe you could actually get away from it. But if you're talking to other people, their reality is being given to them by these things, and so they're going to impact you as well. So it's really it's quite fascinating to watch, and we're starting to go into our own softwares, and it's just going to be completely different. It's weird being on Parler. There's a completely different way of people, how they handle themselves. I don't like Twitter much. I don't know that I like Parler that much either. They're both kind of terrible experiences, but it's a way to connect with people, and that's really what we want. Because we want to help those conservatives out there, citizens of our country, who are stepping up to reignite American patriotism, people who want to empower themselves to be a political leader who can make a difference in their community. And that's why we do this. So thank you for the share. Thank you for the comment. And I think it's a great way to start moving into choosing the essence of strategy, because our assumption is everybody who's here is here because they want to be effective, and they have some kind of vision of what they'd like to see happen. Maybe it's school choice. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's economic development in your specific community. Maybe it's, who knows what it is. But, it's something I know that Sean has been very passionate about, is really bringing back the hometown in America and having that be a powerful idea. Because, and it's so interesting, you started talking about this a couple of years ago. The environment has, even with the pandemic, it's actually moved people more towards that happening. And it started with that vision and that very clear idea. So maybe share that with a little bit.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, the idea is to revitalize America's hometowns. I live in a small town, and it's just a way of life I enjoy, and I think others should have the ability to do that if that's where they want to live. And there are some things that can make that more of a reality. And we've talked about, some deregulation. Some of the things that you've kind of seen out of the pandemic. It's video conferencing and stuff like that, so that you're not driving an hour or so to an office. It's being able to work remotely is one of the ways to do that. In some places, it's telehealth, so that you don't necessarily have to be near a doctor's office, like as long as you can get to some emergency facilities, so being able to have that for some more of the routine stuff is another way that can make a difference. And the list goes on, but really looking at that. And, little did I know when I started talking about this that Bill de Blasio would be such a big supporter of it, and his efforts to drive people out of New York City. So it's
almost every New Yorker that I know quite a few New Yorkers, but all the ones that I'm more connected to and, spend time with, I don't think I know a single one who's still in New York after this year.
Yeah.
Some of them might be going back at some point, but one of our friends, Matt Wiley, who's on Election Day, he is known as a New England guy, but he lived in New York City, and they bought a house down in South Carolina, and pretty much as soon as all this stuff happened and the city just kind of went to pot, they got out of town, and they haven't looked back. Eventually, they might have to go back for some work stuff, but it's definitely having an impact on a lot of people. Some people their families have been in New York for a long time. That's I love that. Yeah, just New York has moved to Florida, or pretty much anywhere along the eastern seaboard, south, where it's a little bit warmer, and definitely a lot in Florida. But everybody I know, they've all left town, and some of them even to the furthest place possible, like California or Oregon and places like that. That I think they're going to find out that California may not be everything they were hoping it would be. So, this is, I noticed that Devin Nunes, he put out a parlay, as they call it, and just pointing out some of the ridiculous things, even those in rural California have to deal with on a daily basis because of the state and how the state affects things. So this idea of revitalizing America's hometowns, I like that because it can be something we can talk about, choosing the essence of strategy. So it might be a way for us to think through this. So the first thing I just want to say is that what strategy is not. And so we want to have a clear thought about this. So operational effectiveness, best practices, or just having efficient systems, that's not necessarily, well, it's not strategy. It's not a bad thing, but it's not strategy. So, oftentimes a lot of stuff that we talk about, we're talking about best practices. We're talking about ways to be effective. That is not a strategy. Now, that doesn't mean it's not good. Best practices and operational effectiveness are things that you want, but they are not they're not a strategy. And the absence of strategy anywhere else, like let's say you're running for office and you don't have a strategy and your opponent doesn't have a strategy, but you run a campaign that has, has all the traditional best practices and it's operationally effective. Well, that might be enough to win. All things being equal, having that greater effectiveness, but it's not a strategy. A plan is not a strategy. A plan is a plan, but it's not a strategy per se. It might be the effective outgrowth of a strategy, and you have a plan that shows the actions you're going to take, but the plan itself is not the same thing as having a strategy. And then building the standard organizational structure. So one thing that we get in campaigns, there's a lot of legacy issues. There's a lot of, this is how we've always done it. And maybe you have to have your yard sign guy, you have to have your press spokesperson, all these different things. There's parts of what a typical good campaign would have. We would typically say that having a communications person, someone who's accountable for that, someone who's accountable for the schedule for the candidate, someone who's accountable for the political operation, someone who's accountable for fundraising. Those are all really good things to have, but that doesn't necessarily, that's not a strategy. That's just, those are good things to have. And there might be times where a strategy might be where you focus your efforts in on one of those because you see, based on your current situation or what you're trying to accomplish, one of those is going to be a little bit more going to get some focus. So what is strategy? Strategy is mostly choosing what not to do, or that's really what it is. Or sometimes it's a failure. If you don't have strategy, it's a failure to choose. So one thing that we found, so I don't know if does that make sense? Sean, tell me if I made sense.
Yeah, well, I think.
And of course, the internet goblins got Sean. So here we go. We're bringing them back.
I would just say elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So mostly it's choosing what not to do is what oftentimes is going to be important in the strategy. So you have to have a sense for where you're going. So it's making trade-offs between good things. Oftentimes is what's going to be necessary in a strategy, and it has intention and focus. So let's say, objective ultimately is the overarching, like that's the goal, that's where you're trying to get to. And clearly in the campaign, it's going to be 50% plus one, or we say 52% of the vote, depending on if there's more than two candidates, that might change. But what's your objective? Or in this case, like we're talking about revitalizing America's hometowns. Well, what does that look like? And being really specific as to what that could look like. And so, I don't know if you prepared anything about that, but what could that look like? I know you've thought about it before.
Well, I think, look, revitalizing America's small towns, it's the way a small town is going to work is not by necessarily being what a big city has. So building 100,000 seat football stadium in a rural area probably is not going to be the answer to drawing people in. It's not like an arena project.
So the Field of Dreams is wrong.
Well,
they will come.
Well, I think if you've got dead ball players coming, people might want to come see that.
Yeah.
I think that's what's coming there. But as you'll remember in Field of Dreams, I think there were 6 sets of bleachers. So
yeah, that's true. It wasn't 100,000. That's true.
So, but I think that's one place to look. Like, hey, that is not the strategy is not like maybe we can just become a smaller version of a big city. So I think, and also having a strategy around what a downtown can do. So it can be encouraging different types of businesses to come in, and those types of things. And a lot of successful downtowns, in particular, in small towns, have done that. Have said, you know what, we are going to we're going to work together. It could be beautifying. It could be a lot of states are doing like beautification grants for facades and whatnot for the outside of buildings, so that it's kind of a pleasant, quaint place to come to. Some are in historical districts, so it could be restoring some of the historical elements of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think
the question I would have is you think about the strategy. So there's 3 different areas I would think about, and it's easy for people to get mixed up with them. There's the objective, and then there's the strategy, and then there's the tactics. So in this case, with revitalizing America's hometowns, your objective is the revitalization of these hometowns such that people are willing to come back home potentially, right? And raise their families. They're able to do so. Or what else would be kind of the objective?
The objective really is to be a place people want to live and can live and live the productive lives that they want. And those lives look different than somebody who lives in a high-rise apartment in New York City. I mean, that's just
you don't have to make $500,000 to just have subsistence living like you would in New York City.
Yeah. So it's okay. So what are the things that people might be looking for? Well, it could be good housing stock. So do you have houses or places where people can build, and how is that readily available? And maybe you decide that you're going to be a place that has bigger plots of land and stuff like that. Well, that's a strategic choice, and it brings in more families and people who want yards and whatnot. And it's less like apartment complexes and condos where people are living right beside each other, on top of each other.
So you're making choices between different outcomes, different activities, and that's ultimately what we're talking about. So, it's kind of a concentrating your forces, concentrating your efforts into certain actions. So there's the idea of, so this is largely influenced by Michael Porter, who's a Harvard Business School thinker and business strategy expert. He's done a lot of work in the business side of strategy for 40 years or so. And he's talked a lot about this. And he talks about with strategy that strategic positioning involves a different set of actions. In our case, with campaigns, it's actions and messaging. And we've talked about the Olson strategy sweet spot, which we'll bring up again shortly. And then making a set of trade-offs or choosing between the different good choices you might have. You might have a lot of different good things that you could do, but you have to make decisions as to which ones you're actually going to pursue. And sometimes you might have a bunch of bad decisions and you have to make a choice as to which one not to do. Hopefully you don't put yourself in that position, but ultimately you're making oftentimes trade-offs between many good choices. And one of the things that we've experienced is very few campaigns lack ideas. And there's always somebody who's going to be telling you to do this, do that, do this, do that. If you try to do all of it, you're just going to be diffuse, and you're not going to have any force behind anything. And then the third part is creating what he calls fit, or what we would call our strategic systems, which are just the daily ongoing activities of an organization that work together to reinforce each other towards that unique strategic position. Because not everybody has to be the exact same person. And if you are all going to be the exact same people doing the exact same things, and one of the reasons why he's actually pretty, I think he thinks that operational effectiveness is important. However, what happens is if industries or organizations or any competitors are all just pursuing operational effectiveness, he points out the Japanese in the 80s and 90s, that's what they were focused on, is just having more efficient systems. And what happens is everybody's racing to the same place with no differentiation between them. They're all doing the same set of activities and getting the same efficiencies. They're all lowering their own costs, and to the point that they really kill the profit. So that's how it is in the business side. I would think that it's not much different on the political side, that you end up with a bunch of cookie cutter candidates and campaigns trying to do the same thing, and they're really diffuse. And the truth is there's probably only one person who's actually pursuing their own unique strategy within that bunch, and they're going to be the winner.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And just looking at a business example here, I think look at Kmart versus Walmart. They decided, oh, you know what? Walmart's got a great way of doing this. We should be more like Walmart and compete with them. And that has not worked out well for Kmart.
Oh, does Kmart exist? I'm not even quite sure.
If they do, I haven't been to one in a long time. I think. Yep. So if they do exist, they're few and far between anymore. And as you lose more and more of them, of course, the ability to compete the way Walmart does it becomes more and more difficult. So
Walmart has a unique set of activities, and they've made choices as to who they are and who they're not, and who they're trying to be and who they're not trying to be. And if you try to straddle, you're going to end up in a very uncomfortable position. Yeah, and that's the whole idea. And it's like having one leg in one boat, one leg in another boat, and just staying right there, and it's not going to go well.
Where, on the other hand, Target decided, look, that's not who we are, and we're going to cater to different clients, different clientele. We're going to do it in a different way, and I think so. You can see how that's all worked out. Like, hey, that's not where we win.
Yeah, one of the famous examples I think of is in the business side is Southwest Airlines, and there's been a lot of research done. Michael Porter is one of the people who's done it. There's the famous story of Herb Kelleher, who is the CEO and famed CEO of Southwest Airlines. Was one of the other executives came to him and said, we would like to. We're getting on these customer service, responses that it sure would be nice if we had a nice meal, and there's a few of our locations where I think we could probably do that, have a nice meal for folks. And Southwest had staked out the unique position strategically that they were going to be the low cost airline, low cost carrier, and that's who they're going to be. So his response to the person was very simple, and this is how he did most of his decision making, is that how does that make us the low cost airline? That was his question to the other executive. And it was really simple. If they were trying to be more like the other airlines and they added in a nice meal, then it was going to increase their costs, and they were going to start eroding that unique strategic position that they had carved out. So a lot of the stuff, and we talk about the strategic systems, the fit of these different actions that have been being taken by Southwest. A lot of people have written about this. It's not unique. But they would do short hauls between mid-sized cities. That was their mainstay. Having a fleet of the same size planes so that all their maintenance was the same. So every choice that they had throughout the organization was geared towards this idea of this objective of being the low-cost airline, and that organized all their thoughts. And another really good book that I think goes to this, and I got this, I was telling Sean before the show, this book recommendation from Kanye West, and which is perfect. I don't know if he follows it necessarily. He seems to be involved in everything he could possibly be in. He actually probably has some sense of what his actual objective is, and he does seem to be somebody who makes a difference. But anyway, the idea of essentialism, it's the idea of making that one decision that makes 1,000 decisions, or what we would say, making that one choice that makes 1,000 choices. So if you can get really clear about that as to what that choice would be, it will start to make other choices. And that's the intention. And one of the things we've talked a lot about in these shows is that we spend a lot of time with our candidates and our organizations around their vision, because for us, that is the choice that makes 1,000 choices. And it may not be the main thing that you actually run your campaign on, because of another tool that we use for this is the Olson Strategy Sweet Spot. We've talked about it a lot, and the idea of how you have your strengths and then your opponent's weaknesses, and then what the voters care about and where those overlap. That is the sweet spot, and you train all of your lead on that one point, as they say in the military. Train all of your lead on that one target and just keep pelting it and keep going at it. And, every opponent has some kind of thumb screw that you can really put some pressure into, and you have some strength that overlaps with what people care about. So these are a couple ways that we use it, because especially for the vision, if you really are clear about what your vision is, Sean's talking about revitalizing America's hometowns, that starts to organize the actions you take. I'm going to guess once you clarified that for yourself, Sean, that it started affecting who you talk to about this idea. Anyways, just say about that. Like, what are some of the choices you started making about the kind of things you're doing? It's a pet project that you're involved in, but this is organized. This idea of revitalizing America's hometowns is organize your actions.
Well, it's like, okay, so yeah, not only focusing on who to talk to, people who've had experience in maybe rebuilding or relaunching some downtowns, or but first finding out, okay, so what is the core idea that makes sense so that people can really tap into it? Like, so having a core at your in your town, like something that can galvanize people together, so that there's some sort of drawing principle to it, is something that makes a difference in a lot of places. I think one of the things we're talking about today is what makes certain towns unique. Mm-hmm. And so it could be talking to employers about how they choose cities to either relocate to, or if they're already somewhere, what made them expand in that location or whatnot. And because it really is about the differentiators that make a difference. And when a community is true to who it is, mm-hmm. And does those types of, and takes the actions to do that, well, then other things can follow, and it could be, in some place it might be, allowing people on their plot of land to have, chickens or whatever.
Yeah. What you're saying is that really, you're going to have to be able to distinguish with this specific project, distinguish between what are those actions that pretty much anywhere you are as a small town, hometown, as you call them.
Yeah.
That pretty much everywhere they're going to have these elements, but then you're going to have to look at what are the things that are different and might be different for this town versus this town, because this town could establish themselves as being the small town where freelance consultants love to live.
Yeah.
This is where they get to raise their kids, good school system. They get to be part of a community, and the internet is screaming fast, and they're able to be able to, do all the meetings and everything they need to do. And that's what they do. To another town where maybe they do have, you can have chickens and whatever else. And it's people who are a little bit more rustic and trying to be a little bit more off the grid. And maybe internet's not the thing that they need. They don't need it as screaming fast, potentially. Who knows?
Exactly. Or, it could be arts and the art. And, I know of a small town in Indiana that has like a performance center, and like their downtown is really built around the arts. And that's the thing that, like, people who want to be near that, it's something that they do. And it's a way they've drawn in employers. Like, hey, this is for your employees. It could be a park system. You just don't know what it is that would make the difference.
Yeah.
And
what we're saying is, don't try to be all things to all people. And this is really important. You take a small town, the small town examples that we just talked about, and you apply that to if you're a candidate for office. If you're trying to be all things to all people, you're not going to distinguish yourself. And here's the thing: there's going to be plenty of those people who you're trying to be all things to. They are not going to like you anyway.
Exactly.
Why worry about that?
I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, like when we were talking about the Georgia Senate race, and weighing in on the possible name change of the Atlanta Braves. And when strategically it made sense for Senators Loeffler and Perdue to weigh in on that against it. And that was a strategic decision that made sense. Because you know what, you're not going to make everybody happy. And so, and this is where, most of their electorate is. And so what is it like? Yeah, you're standing up for something I care about. And, and it's symbolic of other things.
Yeah.
It's the irony, I guess, of the symbolism that's being talked about there. For others, it's really a symbolism of, hey, this is a past we've had for a long time. And so
that's an excellent, perfect example of something that's actually happening right now as to people making strategic choices. Another area that we use this in our work is what we call our performance scorecard. We track all of our promises for the week of the actions we're going to take, but we always allow for those actions to change, because there's times when you're thinking about your objective and you're thinking about the sets of actions that go along with it. First of all, we want them to initially be a fit for they fit into what we're doing. But there might be times throughout the week that you find out that doesn't necessarily fit the overall objective anymore. It's not one of those actions that fits. And then also what we would say is that you measure what matters. So a lot of times we have measurements in activities that we're doing in life in general, and then specifically in campaigns, we're tracking things that really don't fit to that overall unique strategic position that we're trying to accomplish. And just having measurements for things just because you're going to have them doesn't make a difference. So I kind of want to go into how to use this idea. So many of our strategic distinctions are intended to create focus. Or focused choosing. We just went through a couple of them: the Olson strategy sweet spot, using our vision development method, using the performance scorecard, and then using specific measurements on those things that for those campaigns are going to make a difference. Different campaigns. One thing that was always going to make a difference for a campaign is we always have some measurement around fundraising. That's always the case, but it depends on the campaign actually what that measurement might be. Because the candidate and the operation, maybe we have a full fundraising team, maybe we have a finance committee, it just depends on the level of government. It depends on how much money you can ask, if there's fundraising limits. There's a lot of different things that go into that. So it changes what we actually measure. in that. Any thoughts about that and how we make choices on actual?
Well, and I think when we're talking about differentiation, there are things that every campaign needs in general.
Mhm.
It needs to be fundraising. It needs some sort of political operation. It needs to have some sort of communications.
Mhm.
What those look like are different. And I think we've said it before. If you're running for, local school board and, in a place with 2,000 electors, um, what those requirements are different than if you're running for president of the United States. It's just a different. It's different in that regard, but the similarities are these are three components that every campaign is going to have should have some measure around.
Yeah. And it depends. You might not need to have a full communication shop if you're running for some local office in the Midwest where the last newspaper in town closed 2 years ago, and there's just nobody who's going to cover your race. What you need there is you need someone who's going to help you with your communications for your internal communications, or your owned communications, like your social media and your email system and all that stuff. That's what you're going to be having that person help with, but it's not going to be so much press. So it's going to make it a little bit different. It also depends on, like, let's say you are a candidate who you maybe being in the press isn't a great choice. That may not be that might be something that people think you need, but it doesn't make sense for you to go out there and do it. I think about the presidential race this time, and of course, I think Joe Biden's campaign was a bit of a joke in some ways, but just to look at it clearly, people like to joke about the fact that he couldn't get people into rallies and that he barely could get people into those circles and so on and so forth. And then the president had these big rallies and so on and so forth. Well, if you think about it from a clear perspective, if you were the campaign manager or you were the strategist for Joe Biden, you really wanted to actually probably avoid those situations. Him spending a lot of time at rallies probably was not going to inspire too many people, wasn't going to make the difference. He probably, for his own well-being, doing a lot of that wasn't great. And they also had a message that was about fear and that, like, the world's going to end if more than two people are together. So for many different ways, it didn't make sense for them to do that. Whereas for the president, his campaign is really oriented around the fact that he is a showman, that he's able to really engage with people. And so they created a campaign that was very focused on his being out there and being on stage, being able to perform, get rallies going, and identifying. So the activities it would take is, one, the president would work on a speech. He'd get it better. He'd hone it. He'd do his whole shtick. It was great. He's by far the most popular stand-up on the circuit today. Like, gets bigger crowds and bigger laughs than anybody out there. And so he was working that. So he made sure that the show was there. And then, they were able to get the network television, not network, but usually cable would cover a lot of it. Then they would bring in as many people as possible. They just get people, even people who couldn't make it into the arena, they would have them sign up. So they would do what we would call voter ID. They'd identify supporters, and they built out their network that way. We tried to do that on the Bush campaign, but the truth is we never were able to quite make that part work. But I think the Trump campaign was the first campaign ever to really effectively identify enough people through rallies. And also the energy that the candidate had allowed them to go to a lot of, so they made a lot of different decisions for the campaign that I think made a lot of sense because there's a strategic fit there. And it's not something you would necessarily do with another campaign. I'm going to guess at some point in the distant future, when Donald Trump's not the candidate on the top of the ticket, that people will judge whoever the next Republican leader is based off of the campaigns that Trump ran. But that's not necessarily going to be a fair comparison because it might make sense for their campaign to make different choices throughout. And if you're just doing a cookie cutter of the other person, you are likely losing out on your own unique voice and unique opportunities.
Well, that's a good point, and I actually would say, I think the Biden campaign, basically from February on, got that having him with people didn't work. I mean, we seem to forget that a year ago, the problem was that Joe Biden was
social distancing was not something he was doing.
Yeah. And but not only, so really this they were really able to take advantage of this situation, and they even made it part of their not just their strategy, but then it became part of their message. Like, we're doing this great and noble thing by not doing something that we couldn't do anyway.
Or if we did, we'd end up with our candidate sniffing people's hair and grabbing them inappropriately.
So it really worked out great for them. And then they also got that Joe Biden with the media doesn't work, to your point earlier, like maybe being out in the press isn't the greatest thing. Well, they said, well, we've got a solution for that. We're going to just never have him taking questions that he doesn't already know are coming. Mm-hmm. People know that they're being called on, or it's going to be in a video conference situation where the internet can magically go down if you need it to, or whatever else. Not our case. When it goes down here, it is we are as surprised as anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think that they actually even just made it part of the strategy. Like, you know what, we're gonna do different things.
And when it came to the debates, I said this at the time, it was a good decision for the campaign manager in that case to not have Joe Biden out on the campaign trail. They did all those lids. He was on the campaign for like most of the month of September. Mm-hmm. And that is not a typical thing you do at a campaign. I would actually say that it is a bold move by a campaign manager. It's always hard. This is one of the things we're going to get into. Like, what are you going to run up against? Oh, we don't do it that way around here, or we've never done that before, or you have to do standouts if you're going to stand out, or honking waves is what people call them. You have to do those things. Like, if you don't do that, then you're making a mistake, and it's really hard to be somebody in that leadership position and make strategic choices that make a difference for your campaign. Maybe you have a campaign where that does make sense. One of those things makes sense. So for them, they got that taking the candidate off the road made sense, and it reduced their risk significantly by doing so. So, I don't like them or anything like that, but I would give some credence or credibility to the campaign manager for making that decision. I assume it was the campaign manager. So did something that would have been, people thought was foolish, honestly.
Yeah. So why don't people do the thing that's most strategic?
Because, well, there's a couple of reasons, and I think all of us run into this. Real quick, I'll come back to that in a second. The reason why people don't do it is that, if you're someone like me, I'm a fairly creative person. I always like to be doing different things. So I tend to want to do all sorts of different things. And it's fun. It's interesting. If you're really curious, you might want to do lots of different things. Now, what I would recommend to somebody, if you are that kind of a person, it doesn't mean that you don't have to try a lot of different things, but you should try them small. You should work them out, see if there's any success that's going to come from it, and then be pretty ruthless in stopping it. It's kind of like A/B testing. So try a bunch of things. And honestly, on every campaign that we do, we have some matter of feedback loop that we try to create to see and test and see and test and see and test if what we're doing is making a difference. So that's one of the things I would say if you are that kind of a person. The other thing is it's a fear of looking bad. That's also at play with a lot of people. That's one I don't worry about too much in campaigns, but I do see that a lot of people, they are impacted by that. They don't want to be, they don't want to look stupid. A lot of times you're making a guess. All of this is, you're making bets ultimately. as to this is the way things are going to go. Anybody who tells you they know exactly how something's going to go, they're full of it. It's all making bets with probabilities of this is probably the way it's going to go, and this is probably the best decision we can make. And you can make the wrong decision. And a lot of people are afraid of that and going with the tried and true, not even tried and true, but going with what everybody expects. If you do what everybody expected you to do and it doesn't go your way, no one's going to be like, oh, well, they did all the wrong things. People are going to say, they did all the right things. It just didn't go their way. When the truth is, you probably made a decision at some point to just go along to get along. And that ultimately kept you from carving out that unique position that was going to distinguish you from the other folks.
Yeah.
So those are a couple. Do you have any thoughts as to what keeps people from making those tough choices?
Well, I mean, look, no one likes to say no, and I think that is really a big one when it comes to this. Like, someone comes with an idea, and there's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't fit. Like, is it possible that Joe Biden said, you know what, I want to get out and see people. I've been running for office since I was in my 20s, and I was always out on the trail. And, I spent half a century in politics. So
I can handle this.
Listen here, Sonny, you're not telling me I can't go out there and meet people. I mean, that had to be a hard thing to say. No, you know what? Yeah, that was great for running for senator of Delaware, but you're running for president of the United States. And that's different. And what it takes is different. And the landscape's different. And
based on everything we know about him, and we don't know him, but everything we know about him, and our friend Jason Meath doing his Bad Decisions documentary about Biden, there's definitely a chutzpah, and there's definitely a bravado about Joe Biden. Like, he does not think he could make mistakes, even though he makes really big ones. That's partly one of his blind spots that I think creates the bad decisions. So it would not fit how he's handled himself in the past to avoid things, because I don't think he thinks he's going to fail. I don't think he thinks he's going to make a fool of himself, and he just puts himself out there. And so it had to be somebody was pulling him back, because I don't think that that's something he would naturally avoid on his own.
Exactly. And so I think it's maybe it's a campaign team telling the candidate no. People don't like to do that. The other is, having to tell volunteers, or, it could be a family member who's telling you, well, every campaign around here does X.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it is, and you got to do it. And what are you doing to do it that way?
Well, this is maybe the number one thing that we get told by candidates. And at this point, we just know that this is something that they're going to have to deal with. They say they never expected the level of input that they were going to receive. And I'm not going to say criticism. It's not always criticism. It's input. Like, you need to do this. It's always that kind of you need to do X. You need to do Y. And the truth is, whoever's giving you that, whether it might even be your spouse, they don't see the global aspect of the campaign. They may not even know what the objective is. They may not know all the different components of everything that's happening. They may not know what the budget is. They may not know what actions are being done by other people who aren't, in the core circle. So they may not know all this stuff. They may not know what's in the polling. So they don't have a global view, and it's a really nice input, and it might create an idea for something that's really excellent. So we personally listen to all of that, and we try to separate the wheat from the chaff, because there might be some really good stuff that comes through. It's really difficult for a candidate who wants to please everybody, wants everybody's vote, wants everybody's support, to be like, okay, we'll take that and we'll vet that, and we might decide to do it, might not decide to do it. They can't. They are really uncomfortable with that second part. We might not do it, because if you're telling someone, maybe if even someone who gave you a maxed out donation, it's a really hard thing to say, we've decided we're not going to do that. So oftentimes candidates being in a position in politics in particular where you want to win over favor from everybody. I think that's kind of a general human tendency. And most people who want to run for office, they want to be liked by people. And it is really, really hard for folks to not go along with what somebody who supports them wants.
I'd say that sentiment about wanting to be liked and winning over favor is on steroids in politics.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with it. I just want to be clear. We all want to be liked and loved, and it just doesn't work when it comes to strategy.
Yeah. So I got the message, JT. Yes, 50 years in Congress, and Biden doesn't think he can fail. I don't think he can. I don't think he thinks he can. I think he might be a little bit. Yes, he's failed a lot, but the tendency of somebody who, and it's okay to fail, by the way. Taking actions that fail is perfectly fine. Anybody successful is going to take actions that fail. What I think Biden has is a blind spot. I don't think he sees that he takes actions that fail. I don't think he views it that way. So I think that's his blind spot, and it's one of the reasons why he's a potential disaster. So moving on to other ways that what other things you can do to use it. We talked about testing, doing things in small bets. Really the getting to the essential intent of what you're trying to do. And, this is a pretty good heuristic, a saying that kind of encapsulates it. It might be a little bit overstated, but if an action or somewhere you're going to spend money or whatever it is, if an action isn't a clear yes, then it's a no. If it doesn't clearly, like a real clear, simple way, help forward that unique strategic position that you are out to set, you have to know what that is, first of all. So, you have to know what that is. But if it doesn't actually help undergird that, then it really should be a no. And that's something that I would say that you should use as a guiding measure. And then the other thing is to measure what matters, is to figure out what are those key metrics that are going to make the biggest difference, and not to have metrics for everything, but to have metrics for those things that you think are going to do. So I think we've already gone through this. I was going to talk about it's not as easy as it sounds. I think we've already talked about that to some extent. You are going to get lots of things that you're supposed to do if you're running for office. Like I think of this has happened numerous times. There's this group of old guys who get together at McDonald's every Tuesday, and you have to go talk to these guys. They've been around forever. You got to go talk to these guys. And there's like 3 or 4 or 5 of them. They always say there's more than there actually is. There's probably like 2 the day that you go. And they talk to you for 3 hours. And why the heck did you go do that? Now, these are great people. I think that's really good to meet people and everything else. But there's probably something else you could have been doing at that time. And, one thing that we see a lot of times, people want to have a meet and greet, and they want to consider that a fundraiser, but it's not really a fundraiser, and people aren't being clear about what they're actually doing, and they end up with a bunch of meet and greets that take a lot of time and effort. They almost take as much time as a fundraiser would, and you're not actually asking the question, will you donate to my campaign in this process? And nobody's set up for that. An absurd example, but I'm sure it's happened before, a statewide candidate for some down ballot race in Texas is knocking on doors all day long. You're never going to knock on enough doors to make the difference. So there's things like that. One thing we run into is people wanting to spend a lot of their budget on yard signs and things like that. So you have to think about, is it actually a part of your overall strategy? Anything else that you see, Sean, that would be
yeah, and I think especially in some of the tactical things, especially when you talked about the door knocking, the candidate themselves. Well, heck, if you're in the race in the example I gave at the beginning, a really small race, well, that is something that could make the difference, because you could knock on enough doors that is the the strategic advantage you have, and it's the way to communicate. It could be the thing,
Yeah.
but in most races, that's not going to be the thing, and so it's
For the candidate, we're not putting judgments on any of the things. That's the main thing is it's not putting any kind of judgments on it. It's just your unique situation, how you can carve out your unique situation. President Trump chose the rally as one of the main tactics, and a lot of the campaign is geared around that. Even the digital operations are very much geared around that, and I think it was generally a pretty successful thing. When you think about operational effectiveness, I've mentioned this before. Back when I was in Denver, and we had an office in Denver, the Hillary Clinton campaign opened up their one of their campaign offices next door to mine, and it was really annoying to have to share the same building with them. But they always had people there, and they had, their phone bank was pretty well organized. They had well organized door knocking efforts going out of that office. It was always like a morgue every time you walked by. So there's no energy there. And then the Trump campaign, this is in 2016, the Trump campaign is maybe about a half mile or, I don't know, a mile down the road from my office. And we would go over there, and the place is hectic, chaotic. Nobody's doing anything that was really all that effective, honestly. A bunch of people in the middle of downtown Denver doing honking waves, getting the bird flipped at them from every downtown liberal in Denver. I mean, the place was just, bedlam. And yet there's that energy there. And that's what the campaign was clearly geared around, with the rallies and everything else, was amping up the energy and getting people excited and everything else. And ultimately that made the difference. It wasn't necessarily about those individual tactics of how many calls were being made. I'm sure plenty of calls were made, and people did a lot of the things that were helpful there. But you could definitely see that the two campaigns, one was just trying to do an operationally effective campaign with no message and no contrast, nothing else there, whereas the Trump campaign maybe in 2016 wasn't as operationally as effective, but there definitely was a message and a strategy, and most of the actions of the campaign where they focused all worked to amplify that.
Well, and I would say one lesson the Biden campaign learned from the Clinton campaign is they never said, the Clinton campaign used to say, well, this energy, this idea of energy, that doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Biden campaign never said that. And they actually tried to give some outlets for their supporters to be able to show some support and energy that the Clinton campaign just was not interested in. Because I think they did get that there were some psychological things that needed to be done to say, wait a minute, it's not like it was to do that. So,
and I think they also did things that they were actually intentionally trying to affect the Trump campaign's ability to have their strengths. So, making it very untenable to have large events. They did everything they could to make that a thing. Even by how they handled their own events, it made it look like Trump doing these events was a problem, and they were able to affect his energy. Also, by not having their own rallies, they could put pressure on the media and say, you can't cover his rallies live. We're not doing that. You have to do, fair and equal treatment. So, which of course the media, which are fairly lapdog like for them, are going to follow that. So they were doing things intentionally the other way. I think is probably the best way to see that they actually got the energy side of that. So they were doing things intentionally to dampen the Trump energy effect throughout the campaign. Well, the main thing, just to sum it all up, it's about knowing where you're going, which is why we talk about vision. We talk about the Olson strategy sweet spot and various different distinctions that we've talked about, but knowing where you're going and then choosing the actions that you're going to take to to undergird that, to have a system that has all these things reinforcing that movement in that direction. And being really ruthless, frankly, about choosing not to do things. You will have 1,000 things you can do in a campaign, and if you try to do all of them, you will fail.
Yeah.
So choosing not to do things is almost as important as what you actually choose to do. And as we said before, if it isn't a clear yes, then it is a no. And one thing I see people do all the time, they do a lot of mental gymnastics to try to come up with a way that makes sense to kind of probably do this. They try to justify an action. If you're doing that, if it's taking a lot of brain power to think of why this is a good idea, then it's probably something to say no to and not spend any time on it. So you have our permission to be ruthless and saying no to tactics, actions, various things. As long as it's not, I choose no for fundraising, in which case you will be very unsuccessful because you won't be able to do any of the other things.
Yeah, you'll get to the worst types of choosing if you choose not to do fundraising, which is you're choosing not to be, depending on your race, not to be on TV, not to be on mailboxes, and that's a choice you're really making when you choose not to fundraise.
Mm-hmm.
And so just remember that, hey, I don't enjoy this now. And then when you don't enjoy 6 months later, the fact that your opponent's hitting you with a mail piece or with a TV ad you don't like, and you go, we need to respond, or we need to do whatever. And you say, well, there were...
You chose way back 6 months ago not to fundraise, which was the same choice as choosing not to be able to respond.
Yes. And so then you're looking at a different set of decisions and trade-offs.
Then you fall into the bargaining.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, that's where people go next, is bargaining. Bargaining for what can I get? What else can I do? Maybe we can just cut this budget in half, and we didn't have the money for that budget to begin with, so you're cutting half of nothing. So
yeah.
You're not making any gains here. Just to be clear, so choosing not to do things is as important as choosing what to do and being clear about where you're going. And we'll talk more about this as we go along. But as we start to move into the end of the program, Sean, would you like to tell people how they can be a part of stuff we're up to?
Absolutely. Well, first, if you like this program, we ask you to sign up. Go to politicaltradesecrets.com and sign up. Know when be a political trade secrets insider. Get the exclusives of what we're up to. Find out about upcoming episodes. It's really your best opportunity to weigh in on what you'd like to see. So that's politicaltradesecrets.com. Look, this conversation today is about what it takes, the decisions that go into it, thinking strategically about what it takes to run for office or an organization you might be working with. But this really transcends whatever it is you're doing in politics. And we would love to talk to you about it. It's olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com. It's Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. And go ahead and set up that conversation, and we can start to work with you to create the strategic system that will make a difference for your campaign.
And if you don't know if you're going to run for office yet, but you think you'd like to run for office, we're happy to have a gratis consultation. We want to support people, empower them to make a good decision. Oftentimes we talk to somebody and it's not the right decision for them to run for office. So we're happy to have that conversation, because there might be another way that you can serve and make a difference in your community and be a political leader in another form or fashion. And that usually is going to take a conversation with someone like us to help you navigate that, to do what will be the best way for you to make a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then we're also fueled, we're supported by Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us, and they handle the one-on-one conversations on the doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone with canvassing, petitioning, or paid live calling. Don't miss your opportunity to have these things done well, and with the professionalism you and your campaign and your organization deserve, and on a scale that will make a difference based on the strategic stuff we were just talking about today. 10centtexting.com. This is where you can really set up your political texting campaign. This is a tactic that really allows you to connect with voters in a meaningful way. Look, 82% of people open every text they receive. It's compulsive. They can't help themselves. So what are you doing to make sure that you are actually breaking through, and it's not just another thing they open because they don't like the red number on their iPhone?
Mhm.
Well, at 10centtexting.com, you can put an image, a GIF, or even a short video right there in the text message, and give them something that's compelling and that can deliver your message. Look, you're spending campaign resources maybe on digital ads or TV commercials. Well, why not get that out to voters another way, right where they are in a place you know they're going to open it?
Mhm.
This is something that 10 Cent Texting can do for you. You can download the book on political texting. To my knowledge, there's only one book on political texting,
Yep.
and it's
That's all I know.
available. It's available at 10centtexting.com.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And it's definitely, we've heard a lot of really good positive things this election cycle in particular. It's the only place people plan to go anymore. And a number of even our competitors are like, you know what, this is the thing to use if you're trying to get in front of people. And one of the things you're talking about is, being compelling and really being visual. This is something we're going to talk about more in upcoming episodes, but it's one of the reasons why President Trump has been so effective and gotten so much done is, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. We're going to talk about Cicero and making Rome great again, and how one of the things that he talks about is being visual and being interesting in keeping people's attention. And that is something that Donald Trump, who also had a classical education in his upbringing, I'm sure is very familiar with Cicero. And people are going to find out that I'll spoil the joke a little bit. Everything you see from Donald Trump, Cicero did 2,000 years ago. And it is, and probably did it at an even, he didn't have Twitter, but he made it work with what technology they had at the time, and he was much rougher on his critics, I would say. So that is so we'll be talking about that tomorrow, and please do join us. If you have any questions or comments after the show, please do post them. Thank you for the comments throughout the show today. Thank you for sharing the episodes as well. That really makes a difference. And wherever you're watching, whatever platform, please do subscribe or follow. And then if you're listening on one of the podcasting platforms, please do also subscribe or follow, but then also leave a review and a rating, and let us know what you like about the show, and we'll do more of that. But thank you very much. It's been an excellent show. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for all of your contributions. I'm looking forward to seeing you revitalize America's hometowns.
Yeah.
And I think it's well on its way for folks. So, and if you're interested, do email Sean about that if you're interested in that topic. But thank you very much. We'll see you again tomorrow, roughly around 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And thank you for joining us for Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.